Right. Hello and welcome to this latest episode of Hypnotherapy Reflections from Training to Practice. Today we have the lovely Nicole Child with us. Nicole qualified as a solution-focused hypnotherapy at our school in Essex, and she's been supporting people since she's qualified within a clinic and really making a difference to how people feel and the wider surroundings. So today we're going to explore her journey, the unique insights, both the personal ones she's got and those gained from her training with CPHT, and how the powerful impact of solution-focused hypnotherapy or how it's had impact on her and impact on her clients. So get ready for an inspiring conversation highlighting the transformative power of hypnotherapy. So welcome, Nicole. Thank you for joining us for this little chat.
Oh,
Hello.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's introduce you first. So tell us all about who you are, what your name is, where you practice, what the name of your practice is.
So I'm Nicole, as Gary said. I am based in Essex, in Witham, which is
Okay.
where I work with my clients face to face, so
Yeah.
in person, but I also work internationally online as well.
Wow. So you've got a local business within Witham sort of generics, geography, I should say, and you've got a global business.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So, wow, look at that. So, first question I have, and I'm like anybody who's watched any of these videos, I have a group of questions, all fairly similar, but want to know your story behind each one. So, what motivated you to pursue training as a hypnotherapist? Just
Well, I'd actually had some hypnotherapy in the past.
okay.
I was trying to work this out. It was about 12 years ago. So
Wow.
I was a teacher before,
Right.
and I've always been quite funny with blood. Um,
Right.
and I'd had quite a bad experience when I was back at school with an
Mm,
incident that happened around blood. And it's just kind of stuck with me.
yeah.
And then when I was teaching, children are constantly
Yeah.
banging their noses, cutting
Yeah.
themselves. And it got to the point where I felt that really out of control, which is not
Right.
something I feel. And I knew I needed to get some help with it. So I'd
Mm,
gone to a hypnotherapist, and yeah, it was life changing. It just made
wow.
such a difference. And then when things got a bit tricky, so during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
so many people struggled during that time.
Yeah.
But I was not only was I a teacher, but I was a head of year, um,
Okay.
and having to manage my staff, my team, parents, and all the children. I really struggled because I saw so many people struggle.
And I guess through the pandemic in that teaching industry, now, I'm too old to have my own children, but I've got grandchildren from my own children. And the management of who should go to school, who shouldn't go to school, how they go to school, if a teacher should or shouldn't, it must have been, if you had a role of head teacher or your head of year, things like that, that must have been a lot of work
Yeah.
just to manage without having the fears and the the complications of the pandemic, what might happen to you. That must have been huge.
Oh, it was so hard. We'd gone from, having it drummed into us that we couldn't be online, we couldn't have any
Mm,
sort of online presence, to all of a sudden, you're now going to be teaching online, and then having parents judge you.
yeah,
Uh, I was teaching in quite an affluent area, and parents were very involved with their children. So
yeah,
having to juggle that as well, and just found, not just myself with everything that was going on, but then having to manage my team and trying to support them, but not necessarily knowing how. Um,
wow,
there was this big unknown around it, and just found that I was really starting to struggle.
yeah,
I've always been that person that's always had the solution,
yeah,
or
yeah,
wanted to help people, and all of a sudden I realized there were things that I couldn't do. And it got to the point where, with all the pressures and everything else, when we then got back to normality, I then found that I was just really struggling.
mm,
I couldn't get a doctor's appointment because there's no
yeah.
way that I would have been able to get time out, in school
Oh
hours.
wow. So it wasn't even that the doctors were busy, you were too busy
Too
to
busy.
actually fit it as well.
Yeah, well, too busy, but also I knew as well in the back of my mind that if I'd gone to the doctors, I
Mm,
would have been signed off.
yeah, and
To
you didn't
not,
want that.
no, that
Wow.
for me, I just didn't see a solution out with
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. And I thought, actually, no, I'd had hypnotherapy before. Let's look into that again. Found a lady in my local area who managed to get me a weekend appointment
Mm-hmm.
and had a couple of sessions with her. Now, she's not solution focused.
No.
She has a solution focused approach, but
Mm-hmm.
not specifically solution focused. And I had one session and came away and was like, oh my gosh, there's hope.
Mm.
But 4 sessions in, and I was like, right, actually, no, I know, I've got a plan now. And I was talking quite a bit with her around sort of wanting to
Yeah.
change careers. And she said to me, she was like, I think you'd be brilliant
Yeah.
at, doing some hypnotherapy. And I was like, oh, okay. And I thought it was really strange that somebody who was already in the field was
Mm.
suggesting that I do something. Because,
Yeah.
quite a lot of people gatekeep and very
Yeah.
much don't want to share with you
Yeah.
their insights. And I thought, okay, I'll have a look into it. And I'd gone out on a night out with a friend and said, look, I can't teach anymore. I can't do this. And my friends had noticed this real difference in me.
Right.
I mean, I stopped socializing, I stopped going out so much. And the odd time that I did, and we'd been out and, it was a late night, it must have been about 1 o'clock in the morning. We'd got home and I started scrolling through Google thinking, I'm going to look to see if there's any hypnotherapy courses. Found a couple, bookmarked them, and then went to sleep thinking, this will never happen. And the next morning I woke up with this clarity and thought, no, I'm going to investigate this a little bit more.
Yeah. And I guess now we'll talk about it later, but I guess now you know what happened in the night. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
what part of the sleep actually clarified that for you. So
Yeah.
I mean, you've answered loads of the questions all in one, but one of the things what I have can't help noticing even now about you, you've just said you would withdraw when you went socializing. You've always been such a nice, friendly, engaging person. So to think that even somebody who was so positive and outgoing was withdrawing, you could see where that pressure point was. Because I can imagine if I came to see you as a therapist, it's an enjoyable scenario. We enjoy our clients, and you seem to be somebody who goes automatically makes people smile. So you're warm, you're friendly, and that comes over every time I see you.
Oh, thank you. But I mean, the thing is, I think that I've always been very good at masking it. So
Yes.
although, I was crumbling inside,
Yeah.
still showed up every day. I
Yeah.
still, because I had staff, I had
Yeah.
130
I,
children
I
under
think a
me.
lot of people feel that pressure and hold that space. So I'm so pleased you found it. So I was going to ask you, what did you do before you became a hypnotherapist? But obviously, very much into teaching, very much into helping people and educating people. Do you think that previous occupation has helped you now?
Definitely, definitely. I get to do the things that I love doing now that I used to like in teaching.
Right.
Loved in teaching, which was the actual teaching side of things. As you know,
Mm.
we teach about the brain,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I love doing that. I work with children and adults, so being able to tailor that to the specific client,
Yeah.
uh, being creative around that was one of my
Yeah.
favorite things. But it's also the fact of, I went into teaching because I wanted to help people. I wanted to
Yes.
help them feel empowered and,
Yeah.
feel positive. And teaching didn't become that, towards the end. And
Yeah.
actually, I get to do all of that now, but on my own terms, which
Wow.
I love.
And you're in control of that. So one of the questions I was going to ask is what inspired you to transition between what you did and into hypnotherapy? But some of that was a need. You needed to stop feeling and having that pressure put on you. But why hypnotherapy? Just because you got helped, there's one element, but why hypnotherapy for you? And why solution focused?
I think for me, I mean, one, like I say, I saw the results of it.
Mm,
I'm somebody that I can't do something if I don't believe in it. I feel like, I'd
mm,
feel like such a hypocrite if I was teaching people stuff that I didn't do myself and had
yeah,
been through.
yeah,
So one, actually seeing the results
mm,
that happen from it. I love the neuroscience behind all of it. I've always been very fascinated. I mean, I've got a psychology degree,
right,
always been fascinated by how people tick and how people
yeah,
work. But it was, it's just such a what what we teach is so simple,
Mm,
that anybody can understand it. And I think that was the thing as well. When I first looked into it, and it was like, oh, this actually does sound quite complicated. How
mm,
do you teach this to people who are depressed or highly
yeah,
anxious? But actually, when you get down to the crux of it,
yeah.
it's actually really simple.
I think one of the wonderful things, and I often say this to students, is that we take probably the most complex thing in the universe is the human brain, and we make it understandable for everybody. Because if we started talking purely around neuroscience, the real depth of it, it would just lose all of us. So we've taken that and then, okay, how do we then translate this stupidly complex thing into something which everybody can relate to? And that's what we've done. We've taken 2 million years of evolution and showed you it in 15 minutes. It's
And that's
amazing.
the thing. I mean, I've worked with people who would consider themselves, when I said to them, "Oh, I'll explain to you how the brain works," they're like, "Oh gosh," who really struggle with concepts to get to understand that. And I've worked with, I worked with a doctor who
Mm,
readily prescribes medication, and I did have a bit of a moment where I thought, "Oh gosh, he's going to know more than I do," but for him to walk away and go, "I've had 20 years, 20 years of
yeah.
practice, however many years of training." And he was like, "But I didn't know half of this stuff."
No.
It's incredible.
Yeah, we quite often we get doctors of psychology, we get psychiatrists, GPs on our courses now. And one hospital in Birmingham, we're on their fourth doctor of psychology who works within the hospital, and the hospital send them on because they need the doctors to understand this, and they didn't know they didn't. So it is amazing how we can do that. So I can see why that massively, excites you
Yeah.
every time. So, how did you discover and then make that decision between hypnotherapy, which you've had and you believed in, you knew it worked, but it wasn't solution focused as per se, and you after a night out, shall we say? Well, I won't say what condition you was in. You bookmarked some stuff, but then you chose CPHT. What was the difference? What made you choose CPHT and pure solution focused hypnotherapy compared to all the others? And there's hundreds of options.
There's so many options out there. I think for me, it was the fact that it was local as well, because I couldn't do something where I would have to travel miles to get to. It worked around my schedule, so I didn't have to stop teaching.
Hmm.
There was no way I was going to be able to go part-time or even ask for time off to go train. So that in itself was like, oh, they're ticking some of those boxes. I loved the fact, like I said, it was solution focused. It was neuroscience rather than the woo-woo stuff, which, I love, and it's very interesting, but it wasn't the path that I wanted to take. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to book a call and
Yeah,
chat to somebody. And it was you that I'd spoken to,
yeah.
which
Terrible.
I know, but I loved that it was a very direct, it was, this is how we do things. This is what would happen,
Yeah.
and it was reassuring to know as well that there were you mentioned there were other teachers
Yes.
on, that are trained. And I thought, actually, oh, okay, because that's the thing I think as well, that when you're in that such a state, you do feel quite isolated, and you feel like you're the
Yeah.
only person
Yeah. Yeah.
experiencing it.
It's funny because I was talking to graduate two of the I was in Kent lecturing yesterday, and two of the students are teachers in Nottingham. Oh, every single course we have teachers on it, and part of that's quite sad because they're leaving teaching to become hypnotherapists because they still want to help people. But the thing they love to do is the smallest part of their job. But we get a lot of nurses, we get a lot of mental health nurses. There's a mental health nurse who's on, say, the not well, every course again. We get lots of people from, you might call public sector, who join up vocationally because they want to help people, and they find it too difficult. Not the job, they actually not being allowed to do what they signed up for. And so we get so from police officers, nurses, teachers, all across that sector where it's more vocational, where they want to do it, they want to help people. So we do get a lot of people from that sector. And so I love the fact that all of those people are people, and that's why they want to do it. So they'll be very good at what we do. But they're not allowed to do what they do. And it's quite sad because they're amazing at their jobs. They're just not allowed to do their job so much. So they want to take control back. And as you said earlier, this gives you a choice of actually doing it the way you want to and when
Yeah,
you want to.
exactly
So
that.
that's pretty cool.
And I think the thing that really cemented it for me was when I think I said to you, "What can I do?" Because I think I spoke to you before the summer holidays, and I remember saying to you, "What can I do to like swat up, or can you recommend some books?" Or and I remember you just saying to me, "Just enjoy your summer,
Yes.
just relax and enjoy your summer because." You can start after the summer. And I'd never been in that position where someone had said to me, no, just relax.
Mm,
Whereas every other course I've done, any training around, teaching, it was
yeah.
always, no, read up on this, you can do this, there's always preparation. And I thought, oh, actually, wow, that, and the fact as well that the course wasn't a week, just a week. I mean, I know it ran at weekends, but it wasn't a weekend course. It wasn't you do 12 hours, which you see quite a lot on lots
Yeah.
of courses. It was actually, no, it runs for nearly a year. So I
Yeah.
thought, oh, actually, that's what I need, because that's going to cover quite a lot then.
Yeah. And I think the difference is we don't teach people hypnotherapy. We teach people to be practitioners of hypnotherapy. So at the end of it, you're confident, you're competent, and you're capable of helping people who you really want to help with total confidence, because we cover all of the aspects, what you might need to help you. And I think that's the difference. I can teach anybody hypnosis in 10 hours of a course. Not going to make them great hypnotherapists, and it's not going to make them great practitioners, and it's not going to give them the confidence to do that. So that's really important to us, because I want everybody who sits down on a course to be massively successful, whatever that means to them. So that's really important. And we also have lots of, we do have lots of teachers, um, but we also have lots of different lecturers, because not everybody's a grumpy old sod like me. You would have had Claire, you would have had Dawn, you would have, this weekend in Essex actually been running this weekend. They've had Lee and Sarah. So they can see different types of ways you can lecture, you can be a practitioner. You don't have to all be like me. Everybody's got their own way of doing things, their own personality. So we show lots of voices when we're teaching, so you feel comfortable. You don't have to do it in that very, very rigid way what I might. So that's quite nice. So how do you, because you love all the neuroscience you've said, how do you stay current with new developments? Because hypnotherapy doesn't change very quickly, but we do solution focus, which is very tied to neuroscience. That changes on a daily basis. How do you stay up to date with what's going on in the
Uh,
world of hypnotherapy?
just before we came onto this, I booked a CPD.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing the addiction CPD with.
Ah, with Carmen. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Brilliant.
that's one thing. It's the fact that there are so many different CPDs and that they're
Hmm.
so easy to access as well. It's just a case of fitting them around timetables. I
Yeah.
literally look through and I'm like, I want to do that one, that one, that one, and that one, but I
Mm.
can't because I've got clients and I haven't
Yeah.
got time to do them all. So that's one way. Podcasts,
Hmm.
supervision as well, which is a real
Yeah.
big thing. And one of the things I've really noticed, I've got quite a few friends who are in the hypnotherapy field that
Hmm.
didn't necessarily train with
Yeah.
CPHT. And that's one, and they'll ask me things, and I'll be like, I think that's something you need to run through with your
Yeah.
supervisor. And then they'll be like, my who? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't have a supervisor. Who do you go to if you've got questions?
Yeah. And,
And
and and the thing is, it's not ethical to not have a supervisor, and really, you can't be fully legal. Really, a lot of insurance will think you have that. If you don't tell them, that's your choice. But we won't run like that.
no, and that plays a real big part. I do the group supervision, which I love, because even if you don't have questions,
Mm.
you learn by osmosis. There'll be things that people
Yes.
sort of bank up, and then when that situation comes up, you're like, oh, I remember that being
Mhm.
discussed.
Yeah, yeah.
That's brilliant. And also the Facebook group that's part of the supervision as well, knowing that
Mm.
you don't have to wait for a supervision session. You can just
Mhm.
pop it on the group and someone will
Yeah.
come back and answer
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So I think the beauty of what you're talking about is the supervision there. You've got supervision where you've got qualified supervisors to support you right through, but you've also got a huge peer supervision at the same time. So you can talk to other peers through that media, or you can talk to a supervisor. In fact, you get both, so you get the benefit of everything. So that's really nice that you feel that you're always supported.
Definitely.
So a big question then, because you've talked about how busy you are, how do you keep your work-life balance?
I make sure that I have time for me. So just like I schedule in clients, I make sure I schedule time in for me. So whereas before it would always be at the weekends if there was time, or the holidays that I would have, I make sure that I do something for me every day. So whether
Yeah,
that is going out and walking my dogs,
yeah,
working out, even just sitting and reading,
yeah, yeah.
just something, or going out. I've done a lot of sort of networking as part of
Yes,
what I do, and just meeting lots of people who run little courses, or who just say, "Oh, do you want to meet up for
yeah,
this?"
yeah,
And so there's a lot of that as well. So pretty much what we talk about in sessions around the 3 Ps,
yeah, yeah.
practicing what we preach. That
Well,
that's
you've got to walk the walk, I guess. You said earlier you'd feel really conflicted about doing something which you didn't know worked for you. And if you're telling people that they've got to do this and they should do this, and that you're bringing it into your own life, which is lovely to hear that. That you're actually walking your own walk. So that's really important. Um, from your clients, how have you got anything you can talk about which is sort of blown your mind a little bit with the success they've had, or something, where it's just shocked you how impressive your clients have been because of interaction with solution focused hypnotherapy?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this because I've had so many clients who have made huge transformations. I work,
Yes.
like I said to you, I work with quite young children as well. The difference that makes. But there's one client in particular that really stands out for me, and um, she's 95 now. But when I worked with her, she was 94, and she came to me. It was heartbreaking. She was absolutely broken.
Oh,
She, to the point that she said, the only reason why I've turned up is because I actually have no reason to live anymore. So what have I got to lose? She,
wow.
she'd been on antidepressants for as long as she could remember. I mean, she joked and said, I think I was probably one of the first to be on antidepressants. I felt so low for so long. And a little bit of me was like, oh gosh, this is quite scary. But
Yes.
the difference, we did. I mean, I explained, and she was very much like, I'm not very intelligent. My husband did everything for me. I just kind of plodded along. She lost her husband a few years back, and I went through the brain stuff with her, and she was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, took away the little bits that we did. And she came back the following session, and I noticed a huge difference in her. But and we worked together for 10 sessions, and she is a completely different lady. And it just made me think, actually, do you know what, if somebody that old who has felt that way for so long
Yeah.
can change, anybody
Yeah.
else can.
Yeah. The brain is amazing. And, we get to 95 and you think nothing else can affect us, or we put, nothing's. And actually, what we do and how we think does. I mean, that's amazing. I've worked with lots of people who are in that sort of area, but nobody as old as that. But they make incredible jumps. But I don't. Do your old clients ever get a little bit angry with you when they start getting better and go, "Why has nobody ever told me this before?" Because she's been on antidepressants for maybe 30 or 40 years, and actually 10 weeks of seeing you, and she's the best version of herself again.
Yeah, I mean, she did say to me, she said, to be honest, I wouldn't have been able to see you back then anyway, because she probably
Yeah,
wouldn't have been alive.
yeah,
um,
yeah,
but yeah, no, exactly that. And the amount of doctors she's been to, she was working with a psychiatrist at some point. She was like, how have we not? And then it comes back down to that, well, why isn't this taught? to everybody.
Yes. Yeah. And well, as a school teacher, how do you feel about that?
Do you know what? It makes me cross actually, because I do think that we are doing our children a disservice.
Mm,
In my last few months as a teacher, and when I was working with, because I did a lot of pastoral care as
mm,
well, I started to do a little bit of the, obviously I
mm.
couldn't do the trance or the hypnosis, especially because I had to keep what I was doing under wraps anyway.
Yeah.
But I started to do a bit of the brain explanation, and actually this is the reason why your child's acting the way you are and why you do this. And even the parents were like, oh wow, how do you know this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
I say to them, oh, I just kind of do.
Yeah.
But, and interestingly enough, later on, a lot of them did end up becoming clients and working with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So it doesn't.
And that's it. So, so working in that school, you said, wasn't really something you could share openly and things like that. And unfortunately, that does pop up now and again with some of our students. How do you handle skepticism, either not so much from clients because they've made, but from the public or actually from your then employers? How do you deal with those misconceptions?
So it depends, really. There's a couple of levels. If they're skeptical, but they're sort of a bit interested, I just do a mini brain explanation to them. Because again, it's this whole, oh, actually, you're not going to get your pendulum out and
Yeah.
click your fingers and make me fight like a chicken. It's not that. And I always make the joke as well. If I could do that, my husband would be much better trained than he is. And so there's a little bit of lightheartedness around it. But then when I do like the brain science, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, actually, this is based on science. And I'm like,
Yes.
yeah. So
Does
there's
that,
that.
do you think that makes a difference that you have the skill? You talked about some of your friends who work in a similar field to you. Do you think it's different that you can actually talk about how the neuroscience affects how we feel and behave every day when you can go, well, I know how you're feeling, but this is why. Do you think
Definitely,
that makes a difference?
definitely. And I think a lot of people like that approach because
Mm,
I don't know if it's because it's the science, there's the safety behind it.
yeah,
There's that.
yeah,
There's also, with I mean, I know science isn't necessarily always black and white, but it's there in front of
yes,
you. You know, research this stuff, and
mm,
and when I talk about different bits of evidence and
mm,
research, you can actually go research that. There are papers on that,
yes,
which I think which really helps. But I also think, from my point of view, it makes me stand as an expert
yes. Does it give
rather
you the
than
confidence as an expert?
yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely, rather
yeah,
than just being, oh, well, I can't really explain why it happens. You just feel the
yeah,
way that you do. I can
yeah,
say, well, actually, it's because you're in this bit of your
yeah,
brain
yeah,
and all of that. So there is that side of things. But then, again, this links actually with my confidence. To the people who are skeptical, who are, just almost, they're not interested. They don't want to know. They just want to nitpick. The way I see it is, well, then you don't really deserve an
no.
explanation. I don't need to
It's,
explain myself to you. And I kind of see it, whereas before I would very much be like, oh my gosh, they don't believe me. What do I need to do? How can I prove it? It came down to sort of the people pleasing type behaviors that I
yeah,
would.
absolutely. It's like if you get a bigot, there's no point trying to explain him that racism or gun control or sexism, none of that is actually right. There's no point trying to explain it because they've already made their big decision and but they're not clever enough to see a more than one viewpoint. So,
Exactly.
like you said,
Exactly.
sometimes it's just not worth it. But the fact that you can, if somebody's got some intrigue, and help them explain it, understand it better, that must be so good for you.
Definitely. And like I would say to them, just listen, hear me out on the brain explanation, and then you can make the decision after that
Mm.
if it's for you. I would say more than, 9 times out of 10, if you get the odd person, they're like, no, how do I sign up? How can we work together?
Yeah, oh,
Just
absolutely. So interesting. When you was training, you talked about how hard at the time teaching was feeling for you, even though you really enjoyed it, you wouldn't ever let anybody down. While you was going through your hypnotherapy training, was there any personal breakthroughs for you?
Yeah, I think it was after the first weekend we had.
Mm,
So something quite big happened at school
mm.
where I was basically asked to do something that went morally against what I believed in.
Wow.
Previously I would have very much overthought it. I mean, I did overthink because it was a big thing, but it would have very much been, okay, what have I done wrong? What can I do to
Mm,
make it right?
yeah.
and I stood my ground with it, and actually decided I'm not going to teach anymore. I'm a planner,
Wow.
and I like things to be a certain way. So I'd had it in my mind that I would have trained till the end of the year, which would have
Mhm.
coincided with the end of the school year. I would then leave and then set up my practice. Well, this was October. Yeah, so it was just before I had to hand in my I could hand in my notice, and I thought, actually no, I'm worth more than this. I'm going to hand my notice in, and so I basically
Wow.
resigned.
So how did the
Um,
hypnotherapy support that decision?
It was, I think for me, it was a confidence changer. It was actually no, the stuff that I understood as well, from just even that first weekend was one, why I was feeling the way that I did.
Yeah.
Actually, it wasn't my rational brain that was
Yeah.
being flooded with all the emotions and the guilt and all the things that came into play
Yeah.
with leaving. And actually, when I took it back and thought, actually, no, rationally, this is what I should be doing. And I had that confidence behind me as well, even just in that one weekend to go, no, this is going to work out. And even if the hypnotherapy hadn't have worked out, I thought, well, I'm worth more than this. I can go get a job somewhere else. I had solutions as opposed
Yeah.
to, oh, this would be a problem. What's going to, the
You
negatively
changed,
forecast.
even after one weekend, you changed your perspective on how you dealt and saw what your potentials were.
Definitely. Yeah.
Wow. So during the course, what sort of support do you feel you got from your trainers, CPHT, people like that? I mean, was there a system, and even the peers in the room, your other, was it supportive? Did you feel that? Because you've done a
Definitely.
lot of training, you've done you've done degrees and all sorts, so you know what training's about.
Oh, definitely. There was always somebody around to speak to. So whether that was contacting a lecturer, that somebody got back to you within the day.
Hmm.
I have to say, I'm not. Back then, I wasn't somebody who would actively reach out for help. But if there was something that I needed in terms of like a client that I was working with at the
Yeah.
time, 'cause that's the thing as well. We were working with people whilst we were training, which was a
Yes.
so if something came up and I was like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this, I knew that somebody would be, one of the lecturers would be on the end of a line or an email,
Mm-hmm.
um, which was brilliant. But also it was the peers that we were with. I mean, I'm still really good friends to this day we've still got part of a WhatsApp group now that we had
Yeah.
when we started when we were training.
Yeah.
But I've also got the girls that I were sat with, and we've
Yeah.
become really good friends through that.
Yeah.
It was almost like we had that, even if it was just oh, is anyone else a little bit nervous, or
Yeah.
is anyone else thinking this, or has a client
Yeah.
like this? But then we also had that expert
Yeah.
support as well when we needed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
And
was.
and is that different from other training you've done then?
Yeah, yes. So I myself, I've trained teachers. So one
Hmm.
of the roles that I did was I did a lot of teacher training, and as much as I would try and do everything I could for the person I was mentoring, they didn't necessarily get that. I know they didn't necessarily get that support from their lecturers
Hmm.
when they were on the course.
Hmm.
So definitely, there was always somebody that you could speak to.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. That's really good that you felt like that while you was training, because most of the people coming to course are either changing careers, so it's a big leap for them, or they're changing career and they've been in a bit of a pickle themselves, so they need that extra support. So that's nice to hear that you felt that. So, um, what was any highlights from your training?
Gosh. I would say probably the first weekend we had where you was it the first weekend? Even just, I mean, it was the layered approach, I think, the fact that
Yeah.
you started off with the relaxation
Yeah.
and you worked with people from
Yeah.
the
Well,
start.
how important was that? Where you actually, when that first weekend is like, right, you now got to go and see people today. Go out,
It's
see your
scary.
friends and your family. How
It
much difference did that make to you by the end of the course?
Oh my gosh, it was brilliant. The fact that it was layered, and although it was scary, it did push us out of our comfort zone, but not to the point where felt like we were thrown in the deep end.
Mm,
So it was that approach to it, which I know from speaking to people who have done other courses, and even quite popular courses.
mm,
who have done 6 months of training and still haven't worked with anybody, which is
Mm.
incredible. So
Yeah,
we already, were working with people, so we were already building up those connections,
yeah,
which was fab. I think for me though, it was the brain explanation when
mm,
it was yourself that went through how our brain works. And I
yeah,
remember just sitting there, and like I said, I did a psychology degree, and I thought
yeah.
I'd read all the self-help books. I was like, why has nobody taught us any of this before? And I remember,
That's the frustration and anger I'm talking about. You get from clients. It's like, I know, wow, nobody's told me.
yeah. And then when you got the machine, well, not the
Brain
machine,
scanner, the
that was, yeah,
EEG brain scanner. So as far as I know, we're the only people who use it. And I actually did I have it in person when I came to train you. So I
yeah,
put one of your colleagues
yeah.
in the brain scanner, and they didn't know it was coming, and
No,
we looked at their brain live on screen.
it was, yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, that changed. Did that change anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, I'd come to it being like, yeah, it will be solution focused. There will be some neuroscience, but there will also be some woo-woo stuff in there. But actually, when you came out with that, and I was like, no, we're actually seeing how this person's brain is, how it's showing up, and yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah. And I think it's the first time I remember when I first saw it, because it wasn't part of the training when I trained, but when I first saw it, it's like, well, I knew all this stuff, but I had to take someone's word for it, because it was, now I can actually see if I say this word, that happens in their brain. If I say that word, this happens in their brain. Oh my God. And look what's happening in their brain while they're going in through trance. We physically saw exactly what was happening in someone's brain when we were doing what we did. It was amazing.
Yeah,
And I'm just so pleased. It just blows your socks off a little bit, doesn't it?
definitely.
So, what did you find most, or what do you find most rewarding about your work as a solution focused hypnotherapist?
I think probably the generic answer that lots of people say, well, we're helping people. We're helping people turn their lives around. Um, that's the crux of it. But I also love the fact that on a selfish level, I gain so much myself from it as
Yeah,
well. And actually, I am still gaining so much. Every time I work with a client, I take a little bit away where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing they've been able to do that.
yeah, yeah,
And for me, it's knowing that no matter how however they turn up, and I've had some people turn up in absolute states,
yeah,
I know that when they leave my room, they're going to feel a little bit better. Some of them huge, like there's a huge difference in them just even from that initial
yeah,
consultation.
yeah,
But knowing
absolutely.
that they don't leave feeling sad, depressed, like they've got hope. And I've had that actually through just even conversations with people over the phone. They're like, "Oh, I'm so excited. I know that there's some hope there now."
It's interesting because I think that's probably all of our favorite thing when we see someone and go from being in a right pickle in a horrible place, and they leave us after 8, 10 weeks, and they're like skipping out the room almost. But an interesting thing, and I've not asked this, I don't think, for anybody else I've interviewed like this. We get a lot of people who have either been counselors or doing counseling as a service, or they've had counseling. And there's two things. You've got the people who've had counseling who've said it was helpful, but it was really difficult. And then we've got the people who are providing counseling going, it's exhausting. I have to hold so much negativity and space from my clients that I find it really difficult at times, or hard work, or tiring. How do you feel when you've had a day full of clients?
Other than being relaxed, like as in sleepy tired because I've been doing the trance with them, I I feel good because
Mm,
I know that I haven't had to carry that weight and the things that in traditional therapies you would bring up and talk about. And that's the thing, I've never had counseling or therapy in
mm,
that sense, other than hypnotherapy,
mm,
before. So for me, the thought of having to carry all of that and then feeling like I would be responsible for it as well, because I'm that type of person that wants to be able to offer solutions and move them away from that. If all we talked about was the problem, it would be really draining. We'd be,
yeah,
for me, it's going round in circles, as we know. And
yeah,
actually, It's knowing that actually, no, someone's gone away and they've got a little bit of a plan.
But how are you?
Oh gosh, yeah, I feel good. I feel really good. And the fact that I know that I've made a difference and that it's that feeling, isn't it? Not
Mm,
thinking, gosh, I'm really worried about them when they go because they've left and I've had to kick them out because they're in a
mm.
state and I've got my next client.
Yeah,
It's uplifting, other
yeah.
than, it depends on certain days. When I have sort of 6 or 7 clients, by the end of it, I'm like, I'm
But
ready for
you're
myself.
physically tired because you've worked hard, but you've not emotionally tired.
No.
So when you was working in the school and you was probably working 8 hours, 80 hours a week, most teachers seem to be working that sort of with all the marking and all that. If you, we said you have got to see clients from day one. Did those clients leave you even more tired because you've done a hard day at work, or did they leave you a little bit more energized? You've taken you from exhausted, but waking you up a little bit to how, because that's what I get feedback from a lot of students.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I had to fit my clients around my already busy schedule when I was
Yeah.
teaching. And I was crashing out at 8:30 every night when I was teaching, unless I had to stay up for, if I was doing training or anything like that. And so I had, and it was hard to start with, thinking I've got to fit somebody in my evening when I should be marking or planning and doing other bits. But like, I'd come away from that and be like, actually, do you know what? I don't feel like I need to go to bed and sleep
Yeah.
away all the stresses of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there was that little bit of an energized moment. I mean, it didn't last for very long back then because
Well, because you were doing a lot of work, but you don't feel that, and it's hard to explain. But you actually feel better after you. So if I know I've had a really challenging time through like what life's thrown at me, I'll have more clients because I feel better. So the more clients I have, it's like seeing a client for helping them helps me. I don't
yeah,
know if you find that. So that's fantastic. So what advice would you give somebody who's considering a career in hypnotherapy, whether that's part-time or full-time, but they're looking at, I think I might want to train as a hypnotherapist, just like you did when you sat there going, I've got to do something different. What advice would you give to someone?
I would say, well, the simple advice would be do it.
Mm,
I would say the practical advice would be do your research,
yeah,
because, like, there's so many different forms of hypnotherapy out
yeah,
there. Do your research. I would say reach out to
mm,
people as well. So people that are, like training providers like yourself, or, even practitioners as well,
mm,
because you'll get an idea of how
yeah.
things are and how things work. But yeah, I would say definitely reach out and do your research around it.
What's the main thing they need to look for when they're doing their research for you?
For me, had credibility, but which is
Yeah,
really hard. But look at things like reviews,
mm,
like the reach out to people who are actually practicing,
yeah,
because that's the thing I noticed with CPHT was it was quite easy to pinpoint practitioners. There was the local directory, and you could actually see that, people that are trained.
mm,
Um, like, even like myself, on my website, it says it has CPHT on there.
yeah,
You'll get an idea of
yeah,
whether something's legit,
yes,
and speak to somebody.
yeah. And
So
I think one of the things what I get asked a lot of, have you got any accreditations? And what I know is you can't get genuinely accredited. Like we get externally accredited by NCFE, which you might know of because you're a teacher, which is a proper exam board. So if you want to qualify with us, you qualify at level 4 diploma, which goes for NCFE. That means we're at the highest level. But a lot of people go, oh, we do this training and we give you this certificate and that. And it's like, actually, where do you get that accredited? And I think that for us makes us feel very happy. Um, so, yeah, thank you for that. So I sent you all the questions, except I didn't send this one.
okay.
So I got a surprise question.
Well, primitive brain's going now.
Yeah. So uh, if you could have a hypnotherapy session or sessions to help someone with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
I do love a crime drama, so I am thinking like a serial killer, but I don't think hypnotherapy would probably help them anyway if they're a
Probably not.
psychopath.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to say Amy Winehouse.
Wow.
because I mean, recently watched her documentary, but
Yeah,
also
brilliant film.
she I mean, she was very troubled with
Yeah,
all sorts of addiction,
yeah,
depression, anxiety, all of that. And yeah, I think she would have really benefited from
yeah.
some post
You'd have
hypnotherapy.
loved to be in her corner.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
wow. That's a huge one. That's really good. Excellent. So I think to wind this up, you better tell us how, because you've been massively engaging as always, how we can find you if we want to talk to you more, if we want to use you, um, or just want to chat with you. How do we find you?
Yeah, so I mean, most people find me from my website, and
Which
that's
is
NC Hypnotherapy. So
NC.
November, Charlie,
Yeah.
hypnotherapy .co.uk.
Mhm.
But I'm also on, I don't use Facebook as much, but mostly on Instagram, the same NC Hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
But yeah, if anyone's got questions or just want to chat hypnotherapy or even brain stuff, I love that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Yeah,
neuroeducation is so important, isn't it?
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. It's so fascinating as well.
Excellent. So thank you for today. And we'll put this on the YouTube channel so everybody can watch it, maybe podcast it. So thank you, and
Oh, thank you for
have a
having me.
fantastic week.
Thank you, you too.